Hi, everyone. If you are joining us, this is Kate and Alex in the Ford's Theater Education Department.
Hello.
We're a little bit early, but we just wanted to get ourselves up and on the internet so that you don't see nothing if you join us. Hi, everyone. If you are joining us, this is Kate and Alex in the Ford's Theater Education Department. Hello.
So we're live.
Okay, so we are, it looks like officially live. I don't think anybody has tuned in to join us yet, which is probably good because this is our first time doing this. So we're still pushing some buttons and trying to make what it's supposed to do. But it looks like you all can see a production still, which is great. We officially start in 1 minute, but we will give people a little bit of a chance to tune in.
Yeah.
And then you'll get to see our shining faces. Time for our shining faces?
I think it's time for our shining
Oh,
faces.
I'm so excited.
Wonderful.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kate Langsdorf.
I'm Alex Wood, and we work at Ford's Theater in the Education Programs Department.
And this is our first time doing a virtual workshop like this to create context. We're really glad that you're able to join us. Forgive us if we spend a little bit of time scrambling and pushing buttons and doing other things because this is sort of a new thing for us, but we're really glad to use the magic of the internet to come to you in your home or office.
Well, we're excited that you will probably be traveling to DC to see Freedom Song, which is our spring musical that will be, or it's already in performances
It
now.
is. It's in preview performances.
It's in preview performances now, and it'll be in full swing later this week.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that a lot of groups come to see this play in our season. We know that it aligns pretty nicely with studying the Civil War in classrooms, and also Ford's Theater is an excellent place to go on your visit to Washington. So whether you're with a big tour group or whether you're with your family, we know that a lot of people come through our doors here, and we are excited to help you sort of make the most out of your
our workshop here. We're going to help prepare you or your students to, if you are bringing a big group, to enjoy the show to the best of your ability. This is based on our teacher preview workshop that we do live and in person. It's very successful, says I.
We bring local DC public school students and charter school students to Ford's for student matinees every show that we do, and we do a preparatory workshop with their teachers, and so this is inspired by that.
Yes. So during the course of this, we're going to talk about the artistic elements of the show as well as the themes. Particularly, if you are a teacher, we're going to be looking at some of the English language arts themes and the social studies themes. If you are just a person who's not teaching anything, we're just going to talk about the history and some of the artsy stuff.
Which will be really cool because then when you come see the show, you're going to be sort of a super audience member, and
yes.
you're gonna see, and you'll be able to really get into it, which we're excited about.
Yeah, we are very pleased about that. And throughout, you will be able to ask questions. You can do it in the chat box that's to your right, and we will, I hope, be able to see your questions, and that's sort of a new thing that we're playing with. So if we blow it, chat louder.
Well, and we're also gonna be checking Twitter.
That's right. If you use the hashtag Ford's Song, all one word, FORDSSONG, on Twitter, you can send your questions to live and writing on the Twitter machine.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm. So please, hashtag Ford's Song.
And then we're going to reserve about 5 minutes at the end of this 45-minute long program to go over logistics and theater etiquette, specifically for those of you who are bringing groups or students.
Excellent.
So,
Let's begin.
Yes. We'd like to give you a little bit of background on the show. This is Freedom Song. It is a reiteration of the musical The Civil War, which premiered in 1998. A show by Frank, do you say Wildhorn? Wildhorn.
Wildhorn?
Frank Wildhorn. I should know that, and I don't. It looks like Wildhorn on paper. That's what I'm going with. Gregory Boyd and Jack Murphy. And it premiered at the Alley Theater in Houston. And at the time, it was almost a 3-hour-long show. The show that you're going to see here at Ford's is a really clean 90 minutes. And it's...
Yeah, with no intermission.
With no intermission, so prepare for that going in. So it's an interesting musical in its structure, in that there were about 30 songs that they wrote, and this is going to be the 6th production of the Civil War, or some iteration of it. It also went on as For the Glory in Gettysburg a few years back.
And this is actually the second time that we are doing this play here at Ford's Theater. We did it as The Civil War in 2009 when we reopened the theater after renovating it. And so it's kind of a special play for us, because 2009 was special because we renovated the theater and reopened it to full productions. And this year is special to us because it's the 150th anniversary of the end of the Civil War and the assassination of President Lincoln.
2009 was also the 200th birthday of President Lincoln, so they were both banner years.
Yeah.
And that 2009 production was also only 90 minutes long, but it's going to be a completely different 90 minutes than you'll see when you come to the theater this spring.
It's a completely different show. Different costumes, different set, different concept, different actors. And if you saw it before, you should definitely see it again, because it will be a new and exciting experience.
And what is particularly interesting to me is that, yes, all of those things are different, but also the plot is kind of different. The themes remain the same, because you have these characters who were alive during the Civil War. You've got we'll get into this a little bit later, but you've got Union soldiers, Confederate soldiers, the generals, the wives, a nurse, and particularly in this show, you've got Abraham Lincoln's words weaving the whole thing together. And so the words to the songs haven't changed.
It is a nice juxtaposition to the period that the story is telling. And so for a lot of audience, toe tapping, and so you're going to be engaged in this way and on this level that maybe you weren't when you were sitting in history class in 5th grade or 8th grade, or the way that you wish your students were when they're sitting in your class. And so we with these unique points of access. So that's sort of an exciting part of this.
For other example, history that is being told through a contemporary lens. My favorite example, that is probably more for the teachers than for the students, is drug history. Now, but it's a modern telling with here is what happened in history. We seem to have lost our picture, but we're bringing it back up.
All right. Okay, we're back. Sorry.
Okay, thanks for bearing with us. So that as the snarky grown-up is my favorite.
Well, but that's an excellent way that adults engage in history through a unique. I mean, that is using humor and sort of embarrassment as the hook into the story, right? So obviously you're not going to be able to use that with your under 21-year-old audiences. But so we use music, we use plays. I mean, Shakespeare wrote Julius Caesar, right? So that's a
at the time
theatrical,
was a contemporary lens,
right? So that was it was a lens of the period for a story that happened ages before, and it was a theatrical dramatization of this historical text. So this has been, this is properly in the human tradition of telling stories and remaining engaged in our own history.
And if you, for those of you who are local, Woolly Mammoth Theater down the street from us, which does a very different kind of theater than us. They do modern pieces. They did a show called Marie Antoinette, and the language for that was also very modern, still dealing with the same history. Like these are the events that happened, but talking in a much more like a YouTube Comedy Central style piece, which I thought was really, that's sort of my favorite way to approach it because the themes and the events are still there, but it's a great point of entry. And if I am approaching a subject that's new to me, like for the French Revolution, I do need someone to talk to me like a normal human
and
with
not
some
in
jokes and
18th century language.
And not in 18th century language. And then from there, I'm able to go and get into looking at.
So now you know that you're going to be engaged by the music here. Let's dig a little bit into the themes and the historical meat.
Yeah, so we as you mentioned, a lot of the students who are joining us and just people who buy tickets for our spring shows, and particularly this one for this commemorative year, are not from this area. And I'm from California, as are you.
I am.
And I remember learning about the Civil War and feeling like it was something that happened a million miles away, because we were learning about the gold rush.
Yeah.
So it's something that I think that is not really in the front of mind for a lot of young people, and it's true even of the local people, unless you're visiting. Probably the Civil War did not happen in your classroom. For us, it did kind of happen in our office, so that we're thinking about it quite a bit. But growing up, what for you as a Californian, when you were like, I'm springing a question on you. When you were 13 in California, what did you think the Civil War was fought over?
Well, I think I was bouncing around between the tactful sides of slavery and states' rights, and sort of, states' rights being the nice way to put it.
Yeah, that's where I was too. I remember in 11th grade, our teacher was talking to us and saying, the Civil War was fought because of slavery, and the kid behind me, who I always thought was pretty smart, he's like, this is ridiculous. She doesn't know what she's talking about. The Civil War wasn't fought over slavery; it was fought over states' rights. And I just went, and I was thinking, Bo's smart. He throws around phrases like states' rights, and it's a really prevalent line of conversation. And as I was preparing to teach this, not specifically this workshop, but preparing to talk to our teachers and our students about the content of this play, I put up on my Facebook page an inquiry asking, hey, in 3 words or less, what was the Civil War fought over? And it's a group of, because it's a lot of work people, like people I know through work as well as people I went to school with and all that, it's pretty educator heavy, and theater practitioner heavy, and museum practitioner heavy. So a pretty well educated group all around, and I got a really wide array of responses. A lot of people said slavery, but there was a lot of states' rights in there, and there was a lot of sort of miscellany, economic something, so it's a lot of these phrases that have sticking power in a lot of ways. Keep talking. I don't know if you're hearing me. There we go. We're back. Okay. So David is a historian who works with us here in our department. He's our digital programs manager, and he, within the Facebook thread, was able to get really to the point of the conversation. He's like, actually, the Vice President of the Confederacy, in his cornerstone speech, said explicitly that they were fighting over slavery, and he posted a link to this document that I had never seen before. I'm going to I'm going to read you a little bit of it, and it's really super awkward in some bits. So
yeah, well, I mean, take in mind that this is a historical text written by the Vice President of the Confederacy.
So it's Alexander H. Stevens, and this is March 21st, 1861. So the war had just started. It wasn't even a war yet, was it? It hadn't. So just states had left, and they had started the Confederacy, and he was giving this speech because they had busted out their new Constitution. So he was talking about how this Constitution differs from that of the United States of America. My favorite thing is he spends a whole paragraph telling the people in the back that he's not going to start talking until they're quiet. It's great.
So you can tell it was a rowdy audience.
It was a rowdy audience. And plus, if you don't have amplified sound, you really do need everybody to be quiet. But I love if you're looking at the primary source document, which we'll give you a link to some of these items at the end. We'll put them up in the chat.
You can put it in the chat.
Do we have it? I do. Oh, you know what? I pulled up a document that it's on the computer.
In a minute.
Don't worry about it. But this is from teachinghistory.org, and they have a number of primary source documents with which to teach history. So he spends some time asking everyone to please be quieter. He's not going to talk, and he doesn't care if it takes all night. Then they quiet down. And so he goes through like 6 or 7 kind of minor things that are different about the new Constitution, about the way that tariffs are handled, and about how like the building of railways would be different for different localities and professions. Or like, okay, okay, great. And then he gets to the new Constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institution, African slavery, as it exists amongst us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. That's
pretty clear.
We're going to war. Goes on to talk a little bit about Jefferson and the founding fathers and about how they had created the Constitution. That was a good Constitution. I liked it. Then Stevens goes on to say, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid. Oh God, it's going to get awkward. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. Physical, philosophical, and moral truths.
That's pretty gnarly stuff, especially to us today in 2015. And it's tough. It's tough to teach. It's tough to talk about. And it's tough to remember that, he's not mincing intention.
He goes on for paragraphs and gets very clear about all the ways in which he feels like this is the morally correct way to hang out. And it starts during Reconstruction. So as soon as the war is over, there is a pretty concerted effort to, on behalf of former Confederates, to make it seem as though the war was being fought over something else. Because it became clear pretty quickly that all men are created equal, and as people were given call the right to rise, that argument didn't hold up.
Well, and I think another really powerful pile of evidence that, African Americans were completely as capable as, white Americans, and that we all really were equal, was the courage and the honor demonstrated by the soldiers, the African American soldiers who fought in the United States colored troops, and how many, and they impressed their white officers, and they changed the minds of so many people who encountered. And that's actually a story that's followed in the play that you'll see. It's one of the characters who we're able to follow is a fugitive slave who escapes to the north, and he ends up enlisting in the United States Color Troop. Wonderful primary source images here. This is the Company E here in Washington, D.C. It's the United States Colored Troops Infantry at Fort Lincoln. And I love about the establishment of the United States Colored Troops and determination in these young men's eyes. And, you know, they went on to fight and prove themselves, and like I said, it changed a lot of people's minds in this country and in the Confederacy. And so they realized that that this whole business that Mr. Stevens was talking about was a whole load of nonsense.
Your questions about the show, questions about Lincoln, your questions about the meaning of life, except we're going to have to make up answers to those. Rebecca in our development department asks, Andrew Johnson, great president or greatest president? This is specifically to get the goat of several of us who work here, specifically Alicia, also in about Andrew Johnson. And it actually, I bring it up here, even though it is just straight up trolling, because it does relate to years immediately after it. Andrew Johnson was really not fit for the task of being the president to follow Abraham Lincoln, to bring this country through Reconstruction. Reconstruction was a mess, and people sometimes still are upset about it. And some of them come out in areas that were more affected by Reconstruction or botched Reconstruction. We've got War of Northern Aggression, which is a classic. War for Southern Independence, the Second Revolution, which we believe was actually coined by a Unionist in the 1920s. War of Separation, Mr. Lincoln's War, and conversely, Mr. Davis's War. I do love this. The Recent Unpleasantness, which some older Americans still use, which shows you
how not long ago it was.
I love it. And then the War Between the States, which we still hear at our site quite a bit.
What I love about this list, and it demonstrates the complexity and the nuance of having to reconcile from this really horrific and divisive, divisive is almost an understatement, this war that really ripped the country apart. And it was Lincoln's, almost his last wish, his words from the second inaugural address, to bind the nation's wounds, and with malice toward none, and charity for all. So you can imagine how difficult it must be after 4 years of really seeing the enemy in your fellow countrymen.
And sometimes your relatives and your brothers. Sometimes it's also called the Brothers' War.
Yeah.
In the border states particularly.
Oh, yeah. And how families were actually torn apart by this war. And to then have to forgive and forget, except how could you? And so it's really telling how we navigate our own history, these different names for the war and these different euphemisms for what happened. And I think when you look at the recent unpleasantness, like that just speaks so much about not really wanting to get into the details of it. And then you look at the War of Northern Aggression, and it tells so much about who coined that term and how the people felt about it. And it's telling history and teaching these stories can be really, really complicated. And I think what's really important is that we do continue the conversation, and that in the storytelling of our own history, the word story is in the word history, right? It's important that we continue to explore the evidence and explore our primary sources, and to use our current contexts, our contemporary view, to really examine what happened and examine, those events' continuing effect on us in our lives here. And that's why I think doing the play Freedom Song, or doing the musical Freedom Song here this year at this anniversary of the assassination and the end of the war is going to be a really excellent conversation starter, and it'll be a really great way to sort of make people ponder once more, this really pivotal event in our nation's history.
And as recently as 2007, when this show played in Gettysburg, it went under the name For the Glory, which is the name of one of the songs that's sung by the full company, but it's meant to represent the sentiments of mostly the people who were fighting. And just the framing difference between 2007 and 2015 in the production of what had been the Civil War musical is really fascinating and really telling about where not just the theater industry, but where the nation is in terms of being able to have conversations like this, because For the Glory it says in the lyrics that that people in the Confederacy fought for their cherished way of life, the land they held so dear, and some other things that were, didn't have anything to do with owning slaves.
Well, and so I think, the fact that we're calling it here in 2015 Freedom Song, Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War, is really indicative of the story, of the way that we are telling this story this time. And I think that one of the things that's really magnificent about this piece is its reliance on primary source research. So many of the songs the lyrics are actually taken from letters and primary source documents, and they're inspired by all of this primary source research to inform the lyrics. And there's actually a relationship that we follow, of a Union soldier and his wife. His name is Bill and her name is Sarah. And one of his songs is this letter that he writes to his wife, Sarah. And it's really beautiful and kind of heart-gripping. And that's taken from a real letter. There really was a Dear Sarah letter. And we actually have an image of that letter. And the way that the set is designed is we have this wonderful projection space. So you can see here, I'm showing you a production still of the show. So when you come see it, see if you recognize this moment. But you can see that, we have projections up behind the actors here. So during this song, this song to Sarah, you see the text of the letter. You see the handwritten text of the letter, and you see the words come across the screen here. So you're getting this really sort of fantastically immersive experience of hearing the words, feeling the music, and seeing the image of this text. And so that's a really neat component of the show. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the text, the book, the unsung parts, the spoken parts, are all Lincoln's own words. And so our playwright, Richard Hellison, did a really excellent job of taking excerpts from Lincoln's speeches and his letters and weaving them throughout the music to really create this story arc that draws the audience in and gives you something to follow more than just, a concert.
I would like to add Mark Ramont is our additional playwright, but Richard has been wonderful, specifically with the two of us, in emailing us back and forth and answering our questions. So he's front of mind for us at the moment. Mark actually used to work here at Ford's Theater in our programming department, so we have a very a large fondness in our hearts for him as well.
They make an excellent team, and I think that you will really enjoy the work that they did to pull together all of these pieces. But one of the things that that they were telling us in one of our sort of early peeks into rehearsal is that one of the goals was to take Lincoln's words and use the text to inform the next song, and then have the story that's told in that song inform the next bit of text. So we really carry this journey throughout, and we see Lincoln's journey through the war. We see the task he set out with at the beginning. We see the things he struggled with, with the Gettysburg Address. We see him stand firm and argue with his generals. We see him stand firm and argue for the rights of these African-American soldiers and the rights of these African-American people, and arguing for their citizenship. And then we hear.
We do
Throughout,
not
we don't actually see him at all. We hear him, but it's so real. It feels like you see him.
He's right there.
And then you hear his words of the second inaugural, binding the nation's wounds and bringing us back together after this horrific time.
So one thing that is useful to note, particularly if you're bringing younger people with you, there is a plot. If we're talking about our ELA themes, we've got our Aristotelian arc, but it's a little bit less cut and dry than with a standard musical, where with a standard musical you really set out, this is our obstacle, and we have this rising action, and we have the denouement, and now we have stasis again, and it's great, and we sing the whole time. Yep. But that does exist within our show. But something you said earlier is that the climax of Freedom Song is the entire Civil War, and so it's just a constant state of crisis. And so watching, did I completely botch what you had said?
No.
You're
right on.
Okay. So what we follow, in addition to, the key points, the battles, the stuff that happens, as we follow Lincoln's journey in trying to save the Union and free the slaves. And we also follow the United States colored troops as in their formation, as they, particularly the one character who you mentioned, who goes from being a fugitive slave to enlisting, to, we can see that he has performed well. And so that's his story shadows the story, or it mirrors the story of the nation at the time. So it's something to talk about if you bring young people. The bus ride back to your hotel is a good time to just be like, hey, tell me what happened in that show. What was that show about?
Yeah. Who did you connect to?
And what did it leave you wondering? And also, we are around if you get things that come up that didn't make sense, or if you get a lot of who was that guy from your students, or even if you get I want to know how tall Abraham Lincoln was. We are always available at education@fords.org to talk about this show, to talk about anything you see in the museum. And even if you are never able to make it here in person, we are still happy to help you in your Civil War learning, and to help your students make connections to Abraham Lincoln and his life and his speeches.
So I think we have just a few minutes left. So if you have any questions and you had been holding them until the end, please feel free to chat or tweet them away. Or I think it's the comments box. But either way, please let us know we're here. And then also we're going to take just this last few minutes here to go over some theater basics, because we do know that many of you will be bringing large groups, and many of the students that come to Ford's Theater, it's their first time to a live show. And we are thrilled to have them. We are thrilled that we are their first live theater experience. But there are some good do's and don'ts that are important to remember when you come to the theater.
Yeah, so like with all live theater, the actors can see and hear you just as you can see and hear them. But something worth noting with our beautiful historic space built in 1862 is more than if you go to a modern theater, the actors can really see you because our walls are white and it's almost impossible to get a blackout in that historic space. And so you are potentially basked in light. And additionally, because of the shape of the building, the acoustics are a little bit funny. And so the actors can really see and hear you too, and can identify what kind of candy. So it's in a lot of ways that's great because it's not theater if there's no audience, and you and your students in the group that you're bringing are an integral part of this play being whole. And we really want honest reactions. We want laughter where it's appropriate. We want awkward silence where it's appropriate. We want applause where it's appropriate, and your students should really feel empowered to have their reactions, but just to be aware that any behaviors that you wouldn't want to have pop up in a classroom are just going to be amplified.
So the super common sense basics: silence your phone, because we'll hear even the little bzzz of the vibrating ringer. So silence the phone, no texting, no photography during the performance, no food or drink, no chewing gum.
On the food or drink, you can have plastic bottles of water, but this is another thing for us because we are a historic site. You and your students might find elsewhere in your theater-going career that your food is welcome, your drinks are welcome, you can have nachos and a beer, and it's all part of the great process. Hopefully not your students just yet having the beer, but later in life when they're ready. But because we are a historic site, no gum, no food, no drink, like as though you were in a museum, because we are a living monument to Abraham Lincoln and his legacy, and so it's a sacred space, and some of the stuff in there we can't replace if it gets gum on it.
If you have questions about your tickets, you'll be emailing your group sales associate who helped you with your confirmations. Or if you've lost that email, then you can always email education@fords.org and we will redirect you in the right direction. Anything else?
Links to look out for: if you go to fords.org and then the production page. In fact, right now,
the blog.
Yes, we got a couple of different places to put you for logistics information and for our coming study guide, which is still being built.
I can't add a comment.
You might not be able to do things. Can I add a comment?
Yeah.
All right,
we're gonna see if we can do this.
Okay.
I think I can say.
Can you say something?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So we're gonna go. It's blog.fords.org.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
That's right. Enter.
All right.
Okay.
So you're going to want to highlight that and put that in your browser. On the blog, we post all manner of really exciting ways to figure out what's going on here and in our show. So there are behind-the-scenes production components. There are education, historical context components. There will be articles about women's roles in the Civil War. There will be
newspapers from the Union and the Confederacy, from African Americans and from white Americans, and anti-abolitionists. Right? What's the opposite of an abolitionist? I'm gonna go with anti-abolitionist. But from a variety of voices. And compiles them into a way that shows a narrative of what in the 1860s people thought we were fighting over. It's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff, and what's wonderful is that the show is going to be a great gateway into all of it. So we really hope that you enjoy the show, that your group enjoys the show, that you have something to talk about with your friends and colleagues and your students, and that the conversation keeps going, because that is what's important when we study our history. So I think that's it. Any further questions? education@fords.org. that's where to find us. And thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Goodbye.
We're still live. Hi.
We're still live.
Hi, everyone. How are you? And now we're going to be live forever.
Kate Vamp.
So the Civil War. I heard it was real trouble.
Does anyone have any questions? We would be happy to answer them as
It's true. Control rooms.
Oh, the bad
Stream
connection.
status bad.